I'm Dapper Dan Gavosden, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which definitely count.
And I'm Mischievous Marcinacchio, and I too own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, but Dan, the annuals don't count.
Well, welcome everybody to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe as it unfolds. Thanks for joining us for this review episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
If you want to swing along with us on our journey through Spidey's past, present, and future, subscribe to Amazing Spider Talk on your favorite podcast app. Every other week, we put out a mainline episode of our flagship show, and in between, we review new comics as well as interview some of the greatest Spider-Man creators of yesterday and today. So this is the perfect time to start listening.
What are we talking about today on the show, Mark?
I believe we'll be talking about part 2 of the Beyond era of the Amazing Spider-Man. That's right. It's issue Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 5, number 76. This issue was written by Zeb Wells with pencils and inks by Patrick Gleason, colors by Marcio Menyz, and a cover by Arthur Adams and Alejandro Sanchez. There's also letters by VC's Joe Caramagna, and this issue was first released on October 13th, 2021. Dan, it's like the really olden days. We're talking about a comic the day it's been released. Isn't that pretty cool?
I know. I'm having flashbacks to just the harrowing schedule of how quick we put out those episodes back in the day. But you know what it is? You know what it takes to get us to do this? Them putting out books 3 times a month. This is the expectation now, right? No, please do not hold us to that standard.
Yeah, by all means. So Dan, last time we kind of changed up our format. Why don't we keep with the new format? Give us a little synopsis of what happened today.
Yeah, so in this issue, Ben secretly called Aunt May and MJ to the hospital where Pete is suffering greatly from radiation poisoning as doctors scramble to stabilize him. When Peter's family arrives, Ben ducks out the back to return to Beyond Tower where he's redirected to handle the UFOs immediately. Aunt May arrives at the hospital to see a stabilized Peter before she goes on a one-woman mission to bug the doctor to give him the best care. Meanwhile, Ben suits up to take down the UFOs with new gear, but he ducks out at the last minute, bucking Beyond's orders, to visit Peter and ask for his blessing to take over as Spider-Man, while apologizing for how he behaved in the previous issue. Peter grants it to Ben before his body begins failing and he slips into a coma. Ben then goes and takes out the UFOs with advanced tech that makes their defeat almost perfunctory. And that's the end of Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 76. Mark, let's get right into this. I wanted to talk about the format of these comics because I'm telling you, if issue 75 sold me on this writing team and this new run, this issue sold me on the format because and maybe it's the issue that convinced me that this might be a great run of comics, because I'm really enjoying so far how these comics are really allowing for a smaller story to develop, right? They don't feel the need to pack so much into each issue because we're getting them so frequently. It feels much more deliberately paced. Not a ton happened in this issue, but it all felt really like valuable time spent with these characters. How did you feel?
No, I agree. I mean, this was definitely a step forward in the narrative. I mean, like you said, it wasn't like a gigantic one, but like this was not a waste of space, if you will. I mean, I think that, we've gotten away from some of the, the mythologizing, and instead just kind of like, these are very grounded street level stories, kind of what you would expect in Spider-Man. And thus they kind of proceed at that point. I mean, yes, we're basically just in a hospital for the most of it, with Peter kind of slipping in and out of consciousness, literally. But like at the same time, there's enough pieces moving forward on the chessboard that you are curious to see what's going to happen next.
Absolutely. And I think part of that storytelling that's so wonderful is the art here. I want to start off, and again, we don't do this very often. Like, Art Adams is taking over on the cover for these issues. And, as much as I love the cover to 75, I think the cover to 76 is really an incredible, like, tone piece. Peter's in costume on the cover that's not in the inside of the book, but it almost doesn't matter, right? It tells us, like, the emotional stakes. And there's a beautiful, like, thing of the spider thread that's, like, slowly being pulled apart. I think when Art Adams nails it, he really nails it. And some of the upcoming solicits for covers are really beautiful. Would I prefer Patrick Gleason do some of the covers to match the interior art? Maybe, but I did want to acknowledge that these are some really stunning covers that we've been getting.
Yeah, definitely. Now what about the actual interior? Patrick Gleason strikes again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this one has less bombast than the previous issue. Like, there's not a lot of action, and when we get it, it's spectacular. Like, the visualization of, like, him attacking the UFOs and, like, splitting Vapor's head in half is so cool. I mean, it's just some neat visual design going on there. But, like, I think in the last issue, he really proved that he could do these great layouts with characters talking to each other, but this just kind of furthers it. There's this moment where, before we get Ben coming back to Beyond Tower, where Marcus and Janice are, sharing space but facing away from each other. And it just says so much about the connection between these characters, and Janice is kind of like, she's beginning to have these doubts creep in about the Beyond, company. And just kind of having them staged that way is really neat. And then for me, the defining visual of this issue was Peter when he's slipping into a coma, and we go close up on his eye and we see MJ reflected in his eye. But then that next image of her kind of like in fiery red, just kind of blurring into darkness, was really a cleverly crafted visual. Were there any other visuals that stood out to you?
I mean, just in general, like, all of the stuff with Peter in the hospital bed, like, that first panel, which, we kind of got, I don't want to say spoiled in the previews, but, like, still, like, it really, like, conveyed a lot of despair, the simplicity of just, a few words on the page with, again, being inside Peter's head for them. Like, the artwork is just pitch perfect for the tone, and that needs to be conveyed here. And yeah, that scene with the coma was just perfect. It's funny, like, as grand as the action was with the UFOs at the end, I did find it a little confusing to follow visually. Kind of, like, I the thing is, you got enough of the gist of it from, like, what had led up to it to know that Ben was, like, causing havoc, so to speak.
Yeah.
But, like, it just wasn't completely clear to me. But overall, again, another solid offering, and like, for an issue that almost takes place entirely in a hospital room, like, this really got, like, the drama going for me in terms of how it was visually set up.
Yeah, I agree with you on that final scene. It almost feels like weirdly truncated. Like, I turned that page to the final page of him standing there with the weapons, and it felt really kind of like abrupt as an ending to me, which I think maybe it's intended to be. Like, you're not supposed to feel all that triumphant about Ben maybe taking over as Spider-Man, although I'm not sure. We'll see how it's yet to play. The art was a little bit weird, but to me it felt like a sacrifice made at because the book can only have so many pages in it. And we've often talked about how, like, the page count has been reduced over the years in these books. And, to me, this was like a sacrifice at that altar. And I'm okay with it because I felt like giving the pages to play out in the hospital was, a really nice, counterbalance there. So that worked for me as well. And you mentioned the great visual of the spider sense, of Peter upside down on that page. And then, as he's, like, falling into the coma, I didn't mention there's those really cool panels where he, like, frames the panel like it's like a spider that's like closing in on Peter. I thought that was really cool too. So we're getting a lot of really great stuff here from Patrick Gleason and his team. So I really appreciated that.
Meanwhile, in terms of stuff that happened in the hospital, we talked a few minutes ago about like kind of the incremental nature of this story here, and I would say that applies to how we characterize Ben and Ben versus Ben vis-a-vis Pete, in a good way. When Ben was introduced again in 75, I talked about last episode about how he, kind of has an edge and, he's kind of a jerk. But you don't necessarily dislike him, but you don't necessarily have a reason to like him here. And I feel like, this issue here brings him closer to why we should be liking this character, less on the dislike. And the big selling point for me was the scene between him and Peter in the hospital after Peter has come to. When Ben is kind of asking for forgiveness for the whole, I'm not asking for permission line in the last issue. Peter initially kind of pushes back like, oh wait, so now why the change? And then and he starts by saying, I feel like I have to share my life whenever you're around, and which is very true. I mean, they're clones, but then he kind of couches it by saying, but you deserve this too. And like to me, like that dichotomy is kind of like the core of who Peter is. It's like, this is incredibly, having Ben Reilly in his life as Spider-Man is incredibly inconvenient and does nobody any favors. Well, I shouldn't say does nobody, but does not do Peter any favors. But like he, at his core, he's like, yeah, but this is his life too. I can't tell him not to do it. And that would be irresponsible for me. Like, this gets at the heart of responsibility in a way without saying I am responsible for this. So for me, like it elevates Peter in a way that he's making this kind of grand gesture because it's the right thing to do, but it also like puts Ben in a better light and as a reader allows you to kind of respect Ben, because if Peter respects Ben, then I'm going to respect Ben, right? I mean, that's kind of like what gets set up here.
Yeah, 100%. And I loved his charge at Peter or at Ben when he says, "Be amazing."
Right.
What a great little moment. Like really simple, but really effective. To your point, like I think seeing Ben come back and apologize in this way is not something entirely foreign to us as longtime Peter Parker readers. I mean, Peter has always been, even if writers don't like to write him this way, like I think at his core and when he was at his best, at best, I mean, in terms of like when the comic was really singing, I think Peter is emotionally impetuous. He rushes into things, he makes snap judgments, and he gets angry fairly easy, but I think he's a character that would come back and apologize in this way. He always means well, even if his emotions can get him to be carried away a little bit. So I enjoyed seeing this play out, and Peter's acknowledgement of like understanding where Ben is coming from is kind of like a kind of emotional empathy and maturity that I like from the character that I feel like I haven't seen much of. And so that was really refreshing as well. And, I made a comment about Ben's therapist last time. He makes a reference to his therapist again here, who is, we know is Dr. Kafka. And I really like the bit where he suggests that like he has a hard time asking for help. And to me, that's like very Ben. This is a guy that woke up one day thinking he was Peter Parker and found out that he wasn't, and he had to go on the run. And, in doing so, he would be someone that would put people at distance from him because he's afraid of getting hurt, again. And so to have him not ask for help and be learning to ask for help, I think is, a nice bit of writing that understands Ben as a character and his journey of like allowing himself to be accepted into like a family that still, I think here kind of sees him a little bit at a distance.
Yeah, definitely. Although, and the other thing that I think you kind of referred to last episode that, really gets pulled forward this time around is the idea that these two are there's a brotherhood with these two characters. I mean, like they call each other literal brothers, but like, it's I did like how you said that, last time around, there's probably something to be said that Peter, can only find a true sibling in himself. But like, again, doing this for the people. I mean, look, if you're fighting the concept of of Ben Reilly having a lead role in these comics again, it might, this is not probably not going to move you that far. But if you're being open-minded about it and maybe had some doubts, like I kind of considered myself to be in that camp, like this kind of puts me at ease about, watching this kind of interplay and this kind of camaraderie between these two characters, because it's like, okay, you know what, like that's right, there's a bond here that goes far deeper than, than not that I remember, but just that I've had to think about for a while. And you're kind of like, okay, I'm okay with this. I'm becoming more okay with this. So
I mean,
anyway,
it's
that's
emotional, sensitive writing, and I think Zeb Wells has shown this. I think returning to his avenging Spider-Man work, there were some
mm,
really nice issues that he did in that series, but I don't know that I expected this quite from him. And I got to admit, like, as much as I love like Kelly Thompson and all the other people that are going to be on this book, it does make me a little nervous because this is so good. I like want more of it. I'm like nervous to hand off the keys to someone else that has shown this level of sensitivity to writing this. I don't know if you feel that way at all, but like I feel like I just like made a new friend and I'm like, okay, well, I'll see you next week, and I'm like, well, I'll probably never see that guy again.
well, I mean, let's give it time. I mean, like it seems like, you know, from the description that, these people are all working together because they have this thing mapped out. So let's have confidence in the characterization here.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, if people wanted to talk to us about it or keep up with us on it, where might they do so, Mark?
Well, you can, of course, go to our Slack, where hundreds of listeners like you hang out in our community of Spider-Man fans. That's the Slack. The Amazing Spider Slack community is absolutely free to join, and you can jump into active conversations with awesome people about collecting, conventions, movies, new comics, old comics, and more.
Yeah, like I say every week, I'm there all the time, and it was a great time to be in the Slack, especially if you, like me, want to share in the collective shrug about Venom Let There Be Carnage. I saw it this week. I had to vent on the Slack because what the heck was that movie? So, yeah, if you want to join our awesome Spider Man community, just follow the link in the description and be sure to say hi. And yeah, like once you're there, let us know what you thought of this new episode. We always love hearing from you guys in our community there. All right, Mark, let's
There you
get back to
go.
talking about Amazing Spider Man 76. I wanted to talk specifically about the Peter MJ relationship here. Mark, how have you thought about like her being presented on the page? We didn't talk a lot about her in 75, but she's got an even bigger role here in 76. How are you reading like how she's been put down on the page so far?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, without, first acknowledging kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is that, these characters went from on the cusp of engagement to like, that has not come up in the last two issues in any capacity. So if that's what you're looking for in the two of them, you're going to be sorely disappointed. But, what I did see here was a very functional, healthy relationship. And to have Peter be bedridden and then towards the end comatose, it allows, it's kind of this major role reversal where it's not MJ who needs the saving here. I mean, frankly, Peter is the one who needs saving, and MJ is kind of the caretaker, and not like in a a Florence Nightingale way, but just in a like in an emotionally supportive way. I mean, so much so that when Ben comes into the room, he's like, well, I don't have the energy to stop her from hitting you. You know what I mean? Like it's more than just I'm gonna feed you soup and wash your wounds. It's like I am your emergency contact, and I'm here to make sure that nothing else happens to you that's going to screw you up today. And I liked that change in dynamic for sure.
I really appreciated that, and I really appreciated the bits with Aunt May that we got in this issue. You know, seeing her be strong and assertive. I think Gleason's take on her is very different than ones we've seen elsewhere, but I like that too. Like, I think her age is a little more apparent than we've been seeing, but man, I loved seeing her give this doctor a hard time. It's kind of what I expect from Aunt May, doting on her son, but without being like truly infantilizing to him. She just kind of felt like she was a tornado that was going to go through that hospital and assure that her, nephew got the best service that he possibly could. I really enjoyed seeing her on the page. I feel like that character has really been given short shrift, and to see her kind of at the forefront here took me back to like JMS, and just seeing this kind of like trio of MJ, Peter, and Aunt May kind of strongly presented as characters in a book was really refreshing.
Definitely. Did you get any takeaways from the fact that when Ben called initially pretending to be Peter to both of them, like Aunt May seemed pretty unconvinced by it, but MJ was tricked initially?
Yeah, I don't really know how to respond to that. I was kind of curious to hear your take on it because, like, I guess you could say Aunt May has been with this kid since he was in diapers,
Yeah.
and could tell the difference. But it was a definite choice, right, to have her not be fooled by it and to have MJ be fooled by it. I mean, what do you think they're trying to say there?
I mean, I think frankly, it might say more about May than it does about MJ. I think that was my takeaway mainly. It was that, you know, Aunt May kind of just has that innate maternal sense that allows her to kind of snuff that out, whereas MJ is not quite there yet, so she can be more easily duped by it. That was really kind of the extent of it. It might go deeper than that, but that's how I'm taking it for right now.
For sure. I mean, that kind of gets to like questions that I have about kind of the history between all these characters, like what do they remember of Ben?
Right.
The Clone Saga is a many tentacled creature, but even more recently, MJ would know about Ben's descent into madness during the clone conspiracy. But like, do Peter and MJ know about his cleansing during Spider-Geddon? Like, I don't remember those characters coming into contact with each other and really kind of getting on the same level. And yet they seem to kind of just treat him like classic Ben, even if there are references to his like resurrection or whatever in this book. I would love to just have that cleared up. Like, I get the character dynamics that they're going with here, and I'm on board, but I'm like, in the back of my brain, I'm asking, like, what shared history or knowledge are we actually operating on here? Because MJ seems very uncomfortable around him, which I think is, like, totally earned. Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, I feel like that I would have liked to see more of, like, the Ben MJ dynamic. I mean, like, she kind of like gets, if she was a cat, you would see like her hair on edge when he enters the room, but then like they kind of don't go further with it. And I would have liked to see it, because there is obvious history here, but like that history is muddied, both due to editorial reasons and then just frankly time that has passed. To your question about the Spider-Geddon retcon, I don't know. I mean, like, you had to remind me of that when we were last talking about Ben Reilly. So if I don't remember, I don't know if this was brought up to them in the comic at all. So that might be an oversight of sorts.
Yeah, and you wanted to talk about Peter's condition?
Yeah, I mean, okay, this could potentially be a me thing. Let me come at this from a couple of layers. I mean, first of all, like, what he's physically in the hospital for. I mean, obviously it's a form of radiation poisoning, but like, I don't know. There's just something kind of very vague and hand wavy about it. It's like, oh, he's in a coma now. Like it's the mechanics of what the physical threat here is not entirely clear to me, except like, oh, it's bad because he's in the hospital and he's slipping in and out of consciousness. So like, that was part of it. And then like, I a part of me feels too that they kind of undid or undermine the threat when like you have that great page we talked about in the very beginning where he's on the table and his inner monologue is going, I am the danger's inside me. And but then you get this sequence, and I understand narratively why they had to have Peter kind of come to for a bit, because otherwise like it would have just made the structure of the story really hard to tell. But in doing that and kind of having him come to talk to Ben, to kind of, joke with MJ, joke about Aunt May, etc., it makes the crash that he hits later, I mean, as dire as it seems, it kind of, it kind of blunts it a little bit, because you're kind of like, all right, well, I already saw him come out of it once. Like, I don't feel like he can't come out of this again, like it's I don't know, like maybe if he was truly out the whole issue, but like we could have been deeper inside his head and he's watching this happen but can't interact with it. I don't know, but like I feel like there are ways they could have maybe done some stuff where the actual threat of what's happening to him would have been more apparent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm still kind of waiting to see like how much we're supposed to buy into this threat entirely. Like it could just be that he's out for a couple of issues or something like that. I mean, the dramatics of the cover seem to suggest otherwise, but we'll see. But I understand that it is kind of vague. I mean, they do a bunch of science mumbo jumbo in the beginning to explain what it is. Not that that means anything to us. But yeah, I think you're right. It is kind of blunted in a way by how they kind of undo it within the issue. And that might just be to the power of Gleason, which is like the visualization of it is excellent. To have it undone is like, oh man, they really like sent a heat-seeking missile for my heart and then told me, okay, it's fine, but until it's not fine. But to me, what made it like more acceptable to me was that like Peter seems to be shooing Ben out of the room and saying like, yeah, you can be Spider-Man, fine. Because like he then as soon as Ben leaves, he's like, my body is crashing, I've been putting on this face because I don't want Ben to see me just like about to die. And that made me believe it a little bit more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then in terms of also the threats of this issue or this arc so far, I mean, like, we get more interplay with Marcus at the Beyond Company, and like, again, like there's some semblance of mystery around the, what exactly are the intentions here, but like, kind of as you said, in our last episode, I mean, there's no doubt they're coded as evil,
Yeah.
And I feel like they do even less hiding of it here, especially with how they work with Janine here. Is it Janine or did I say that? I thought you said it differently
I think
earlier.
it's
Now I'm
Janine
confused. Okay, got it. Sorry.
or Elizabeth, whichever one you want to go with.
Okay.
Ben's redheaded girlfriend, who's now in a
Yes.
bob that Marcus comments on in a creepy way. And she seems to be having her doubts. I mean, there's literally a panel in this issue where like Ben goes against Marcus's wishes, and then we get an image of Marcus with his face in full shadow saying like, well, that's unfortunate. And it's like, okay, this guy is just flat out evil. Like whatever's going on behind it, like in many ways, I'm just kind of glad they're cutting to the chase. Like they're not trying to hide this. Like they know we're not dumb. These guys are the bad guys. Let's just get to it. And we're going to find out what's going on with them. Hopefully soon, 2 weeks, or I guess like a week into this now with 2 issues. I'm not all that impatient about it. It's like, okay, like they're at least treating me like I'm not an idiot, and they're like just coding them evil, yeah.
No, it's I agree with that 100%. I'm not complaining that they're being coded as evil. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, we're not really dealing with like a swerve here, and I'm happy with that. Like let's just have things appear as they appear, you know?
The corporations, the big faceless corporations, are not going to be the good guys in
Right,
comics. They're
right,
just
right,
not.
right,
Like,
right,
let's just get
right.
through with
But
it.
yeah, we don't have to pretend
You
here.
mean
So
Alchemax
awesome.
is bad? No.
I know,
Yeah.
right, right. Or what do you call it? The oil
Oh,
company,
Roxxon.
Roxxon.
Yeah, yeah, right. Of course, of course. Like Osborne Industries, like run by a psychopath. Never. Like we
Yeah, of
never show
course.
things like that. All right. Do we want to get to
Yes.
grades?
Yeah. I'm gonna give this one a B. I think it's again very solid. It's not. I didn't like it quite as much as last issue, but like there's not a lot. There's not a lot to not like here, you know. Like it's just fun. It's fun comics.
Yeah, this one's a B for me too. Just solid Spider-Man comics. Here we go, Mark, adjusting our scale rapidly,
Right.
but
I
yeah.
know.
I'm excited for the next issue. Like, we got 2 weeks to wait, and I'm like eager. I'm not like
Yeah.
on. I'm not like hooked yet, right? Like, I don't feel like I'm like. It's not like
No, but
Superior where I'm like, I can't wait, but I'm like, boy, it's going to be fun to go pick up that comic.
yeah, I mean, this ended on certainly enough of a cliffhanger where you're legitimately intrigued. Like, all right, how are we gonna get out of this one?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, great. Well, of course, everybody, if you find this show entertaining and valuable, we would love it if you'd consider supporting us. That starts by just recommending the show. Like, we're doing this week to week, and we don't know who's listening to us or how they found us or whatever. But like, if you can recommend this show to a friend that would love it, we'd love to have them on board. But if you'd like to go a step further, why not consider joining our Patreon?
Yeah, we can only bring you this content with the support of our Patreon members, and we owe the show's success to every single one of them. And we are constantly making exclusive content for our members.
Yeah, so why not take $3.99, the price of a new comic, and put it towards a month's subscription to support the show and start receiving our Patreon content. That way, you'll hear our Patreon exclusive review podcasts on every new issue of Amazing Spider-Man the very same week it comes out, instead of waiting for it to arrive in our public podcasting feed when it shows up on Marvel Unlimited.
And if you contribute $10 a month, you gain access to exclusive artwork from famous Spider-Man artists, which has been commissioned exclusively for our members. For example, this season we'll be mailing out a print by artist Ron Friends, who's created a lost page of The Kid Who Collects Spider-Man for us, which was inked by Brett Breeding. And this page depicts Tim and Spidey sharing laughs over Tim's Spider-Man comic collection. In addition to that, every episode we release a new episode-specific desktop background created for us by artist Nick Cagnetti for our patrons to enjoy.
Yeah, and like, we know there's a lot of Spider-Man comics coming out right now. I mean, what are we at? Like 4 of them in this month, or like 4 of them in December. But if you do have a little bit of that extra income and you think our show is really a great supplement to reading these comics. In fact, some people tell us they have more fun listening to the show than they do reading the comics. I don't know if that's still true anymore or whatever, but it would really help us out. But like we said, we know just listening and telling people about us is enough, But if you do have the means, please join our Patreon to help continue our show's existence. And if you want to do so, you can just follow the link in the description. And again, a thank you to everybody who already makes this show possible. Mark and I will be eternally grateful to you guys.
Yep, we always are. Thank you, thank you. And speaking of thank you, Dan, it's unfortunately that time for all good things to come to an end. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning into this episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
Yeah, as always, this episode comes edited by our awesome Rick Coast, and our artwork comes handcrafted by none other than Ron Friends, Sal Buscema, and Ray Sumser. And our theme songs were produced by Rylan Bojack, Tony Thaxton, and Spider Madge. This episode was originally released on Patreon as a live stream hangout with us back when the comic was first released. So again, if you'd like to help support our show's continued existence and these reviews, and come hang out with us while we're doing a live stream, why not head on over to our Patreon and sign up? So Mark, until I get my permission to take over as the sole host of the Amazing Spider Talk, before I Let me do this again. So, Mark, until you get my permission to take over as the sole host of the Amazing Spider Talk before I slip into a coma, what's our motto?
It's with great podcasts, there must also come the Amazing Spider Talk. How'd I do, Dan? Dan? Dan! Dan, talk!
Two men who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. Be in 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The Amazing Spider Talk, the Amazing